Hello, and welcome to Manitoba Agriculture Crop Talk webinar. If you have any questions during the presentation today, you can type them into the Q&A located on the bottom toolbar of the Zoom screen, and we will answer them at the end of the presentations. This webinar is being recorded, and those registered for Crop Talk will receive a link to the recording. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. I'd like to welcome everybody to the June 18th edition of Crop Talk. And the season is moving along, and we definitely can see it in the crops advancing. And I think that's something that as we move forward over the next few weeks here, we'll be dealing with more different issues than just getting the crop up and started. So with today, I thought we'd give an opportunity to share some time with Dennis Lang and look at some of the pulse crops, talk about peas and getting ready for maybe some fungicide applications, what to look for, what to watch for, and then some update on soybeans as to how they've been doing and some of the things Dennis has been seeing out in the field as he's been doing his work. And from there, we'll go into the crop scouting panel. There's a few questions that have come in, and we'll get those answered. And probably, if there's still time, I'll have a little bit of an update on where we are, kind of through seeding, crop stage, and the progress we are seeing as the season goes along. So I guess with that, I will turn it over to Dennis. And Dennis, if you want to take it away and give us your updates.
Sounds great. We're just going to pull up my window here, and give me 1 second here. Let's make sure we're on the same screen here. I think we're good. Yep. Full screen. All right, just a quick check, Lionel. You can see my title screen here.
You bet. Looks great.
Oh, great. So today we're going to start off with field peas and give you a bit of a soybean update to what's been happening out there as of late here. For some soybean fields, it's been a little challenging this spring with poor stands. You can see here the image in the background was me on late Sunday afternoon doing some rolling on my soybeans that were post-emerge, and we'll tell you how that all went. Field peas, we'll start off with that. What's looking in your canopy? I'm going to talk about a few things like Mycosphaerella, Blight, and getting prepared for the fungicide application season that's going to be coming upon us very, very soon. This particular image here is something that Lionel sent to me yesterday. These peas, I did a quick count based on the picture. We're in that 6 to 7 node stage, so we're still a little ways away, but things are approaching very relatively quickly. For fungicide application, we usually should start watching in that 8-9 node stage for those first flowers. And I'll go through some of the things that we need to be looking for within the canopy and density of the canopy and some of the factors to consider when going that first application of a fungicide. The first thing I'm going to start off with, and I like to throw this in here just as a reminder, because there are some differences in staging this year. When you're judging pea staging, what I like to do is look at what I call the elephant ears that are clinging to the main stem. So in here, the pea plant will have 2 scale nodes, and they usually have branches. They're right near the bottom. We generally don't count those. We start counting here at, the first true leaf. So that is attached to the main stem. So those are those elephant ears. So even though they're counting the first node here down here, and it looks like this one here probably has a scale leaf here too. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 nodes. We don't count the leaf that's unopened here in this case. It's really important for staging for spraying for weed control, because you don't want to go past that 6 node stage on a number of chemistries. But this is how you will typically do it. Just pull the plant out, ignore the branch, count the first leaf that it's attached to the main stem. If it's not fully expanded, don't count it. That's usually the ones at the top. And then that'll give you a pretty good idea what stages you're at. Going to the next slide here. One thing we need to be aware of when we're looking for disease within the canopy is being able to distinguish between bacterial blight in peas and Mycosphaerella blight. A couple things to note. With bacterial blights, typically that is usually brought in after a weather event. So whether there's been some wind, some hail, some just where the plants have gotten beat up, usually within 10 to 14 days prior to any lesions showing up. And it's usually in the upper to mid canopy. You'll see these brownish lesions. Sometimes you'll see a bit of an ooze coming off of it. And they're also kind of broken up by the veins as well. They don't expand past the veins. Whereas with Mycosphaerella blight, you don't have that ooze, but you have that. They do tend to spread across the vein. And with Mycosphaerella blight, you're going to start to see that in the lower canopy, and it's important to look at that. And this is the more advanced stages of Mycosphaerella blight, but I'll show you a couple of slides here what to look for when within the canopy. Okay. A few other things to comment on. The reason we need to make that distinction between bacterial blight and Mycosphaerella blight, because if you're seeing something that you think is Mycosphaerella blight, but it's in that upper to mid canopy and it has that shiny appearance to the lesion, often angular, that's more than likely a bacterial blight, and the fungicide are not effective against bacterial blight. Generally, it's favored by cool weather, and it can be spread by wind, rain, and hail. When you're looking at Mycosphaerella blight, a few of the symptoms look into the lower canopy. Fungicides are effective. That initial infection can happen when it's really early. But what I like to do for Mycosphaerella blight is peel back the canopy and look down into the lower canopy, the lower leaves, right through here to see if there's any lesions showing up. And initially, what they're going to look like is they're going to look like these small little what we call purple freckles. And again, there's quite a few in this particular stand here. So that would give you an indication of that the disease is definitely present. And that's one of the factors when you're doing a determination on whether to spray a fungicide is the disease present. If you're not finding these lesions in the lower canopy, then that tells me that there's at that particular time that you're scouting that there is no disease present, and it may be best to wait a little bit and come back and scout another day. Again, here you can see just those small purple freckles in the lower canopy. So ideal timing for fungicide application is that early flower. Typically, you want to be inspecting that crop in that 9 to 10 leaf stage, roughly about 10% flowering, to see if there is any disease present in the lower canopy. And then this is something that's on the web here. You can find, just Google the Mycosphaerella decision support checklist. And we're going to walk you through here some of the factors that you need to consider when you're going on that first application of fungicide. You can use it on a second as well, but usually if you're considering a second application, usually you've seen some symptoms already. So that second application, if necessary, will generally happen if disease is present and conditions are right. So the first thing we look at when we're looking at the stand is crop canopy. So there's a few options here you can choose from. So in this case, we're going to click here, and in that rating scale, let's say we're looking down the list, we're going to see that it's a normal plant stand. This is either for lentils or peas. This one just happens to list lentils on it. But let's say we're a good plant stand, about at 8 plants per square foot. And we're going to give it a score of 15. If it's a thin stand, it gives you a much lower score. And if it's a dense stand, of course, it gives you a higher score. Next, we're going to look at leaf wetness and humidity due at noon. So let's say when we're going out in that first scouting pass, we see that it is pretty, it's moderate leaf wetness at that time. So we're going to give it a score of 20. 5-day forecast. We're going to say light showers for this particular example. If a lot of times, if it's drier, you can use that score. That will factor in your total score. And the symptoms on the plant. So if you're going out there, and in this case here, we're going to pick option number 2 here, up to 20% of the plants, based on what you could potentially see on that first pass. When you total that score up, if you're at 65 or higher, that gives you that tells you that you should be spraying at that time. That's what the threshold is at 65. And you may ask yourself, well, why, Dennis, would you want to just not go out and spray regardless? Because you have a dense canopy, the plants are wet. but you have to realize that there may not be disease present right at that time. So if you go out at that first time and you find out you're coming out with a score of 50, then what I would suggest doing is giving it 3 or 4 days and coming back and reevaluating some of those spots as well. The idea behind that is Mycosphaerella blight will show up in pretty much every pea crop at some point in the season. The later it shows up in the growing season, closer to pod fill, that's actually more of a benefit because it helps defoliate the plants a bit. If you can delay that first application because disease pressure is not there, then what I would suggest doing is holding off, and then maybe you might be able to get away with that single application. We've done this exercise at the crop diagnostic school for some of the agronomists over the last few years. And about 3 years ago, when we did it the first time, when we went out, we were only getting scores of 50. And that tells me that there really wasn't much disease present at that time. Last year, when we redid this little experiment, the first time we went out at 8 and it came back at 80. So that tells us that we should have been out there a little bit earlier. So it is important. Scouting is important. It's not just a matter of spraying. There is some resistance to certain fungicides, so you don't want to overuse it if it's not necessary at that time. The bigger thing is besides the disease is the crop canopy and how dense that is. If it's a dense canopy and leaf wetness is there, and even there's showing some disease, if your score is at 65 or higher, that means that you should be spraying at that time. I'm going to switch gears a little bit here. We're going to go into post-emergent rolling. So Sunday afternoon, I'd been kind of waiting for a while to roll my soybeans. I've had some issues with plant stands this year. One thing I'll mention this year is, soybeans that were seeded 3 to 4 days ahead of that May rain did see some slower emergence. I was getting a number of calls from producers and going out to a few different fields looking at stand counts. And the normal plant stand count for soybeans is anywhere from 140 to 160,000 plants. That's normal. That will maximize your yield potential. The calls that I were getting from producers, and when we went out to fields and even my own field, we were looking at that, 3 weeks after planting, or looking at somewhere around 50 to 60,000 plants, and also approaching the insurance deadline for the first seeding deadline in some areas. So you have to try to make a decision whether or not it's going to be worthwhile reseeding. Now, I did do a plant stand count again this morning. I did not reseed any of my beans this year, and I think most growers didn't. There's a few growers that were considering it, but in the end, they just decided that just based on the way things were coming through, that they decided not to do a reseed. Now, when I did my plant stand count this morning, and that's just over 4.5 weeks, I'm sitting somewhere between 100 and 130,000, which is still less than the ideal, but definitely way better than if you were to reseed at this time. So Sunday afternoon, I decided, based on the weather conditions, that I would attempt to do some rolling. I waited till about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and went out and did my first pass along the stone, or along the old railroad track, just to kind of see where things were at. Now, this is not from my field in this particular instance, but just shows you here. This is just over 100,000 plants per acre look like. When you do that 28.25-inch hula hoop, you're basically counting the number of plants within that and multiply that by 10,000. So here, if you're getting 10 plants, that would be your 100,000. Whereas if you're getting way more than that, if you're doubling that, if you get more like 20 plants, well, then you're over 200,000. So when I went out the other day, I'm just going to go ahead a little bit, a couple slides ahead, and one of the reasons why people want to roll is they want to roll because of stones. And that becomes an issue for harvesting, of course. And this is a picture of pre-rolling soybeans. You can see how big this particular stone is. You want to wait until that first trifoliate stage. I think that's really important. The reason for that is you want to make sure all the beans are up and past the hypocotyl stage. You don't want to be snapping any beans at all. And also what you have to be aware of is temperature. Now, with the temperature that we had on Sunday afternoon, we were sitting about 25 degrees, about 51% humidity. It was not the warmest day we've had, but it was pretty nice actually for warming and for rolling. So I made my first pass over this stone. It's not the exact same stone, but about the same size. And you can see here how the roller has really pushed that stone into that nice soft soil. And you can see here the plants, very little damage here. And actually no damage in this case, the plants just rolled over. So I thought what I would do is throw my hula hoop down and I put the roller over top of it and go over top of the field and see what would happen. So in this particular case here, here's the pre-rolling plants. You can see here nice and upright. This is a post-rolling plant here. Bit kink or a bit laying over a little bit here, but very nice. That's what I like to see. This one is a little pinched, but I think it should make it through. But generally, the amount of damage was next to nothing on Sunday afternoon. Now, with some producers that tried to roll last week Thursday, they were running into issues. Still a 25-degree day, but kind of windy, not very good rolling conditions, and they were seeing upwards of 20% damage. That's when you have to kind of go away and come back because you don't want to be snapping those beans. If you're snapping the beans just below the or just above the cotyledons, they will regrow, but you don't want to be having too many of those out there. So some of the things I learned just based on my rolling this past week. Number one, I seed with a bird or air seeder, and with that, I have an 8-inch spacing, and the ground was fairly soft afterwards. No packing on it afterwards, and that seemed to help a lot. It helps keep the roller a little bit on the soil versus and not damaging the beans. The producer who rolled last Thursday was seeing that breakage, and that field was with a planter, and was seeing it was a little bit more difficult to not damage those beans that first pass over. Now, different day they went out, and it seems to be fine. The question I always get is how late can you roll? I've seen first, second trifoliate work just fine if temperatures are really warm. The warmer it is, the better it is. What I would recommend if growers are still going out, I know Thursday coming up here looks like it's sorry, I just got a message here from my student, and I have to take that right away after this message. Bit of a mishap. Sorry about that. So anyway, we'll have to just keep monitoring that. But overall, very happy with the rolling that we did last week. And there are some growers that are still going to be rolling here. Something else you're going to just kind of comment on here is iron deficiency chlorosis, or IDC. That's the yellowing that you're going to start to see at this time. You're looking right now and at that yellowing and that innervating chlorosis. And generally, the varieties will grow out of it. You can see here in the Manitoba Seed Guide, we have the ratings listed. Typically, what we do, the ratings range from about 1.7, 1.6, all the way up to 2.5 to 3. Generally, we don't see a lot of 3s anymore. Most of the varieties that where companies are putting out are really good for IDC scores. The way these scores are determined is we have a site near Winnipeg. Each of these are single row plots. And you can see here in this particular instance here that this particular plant here or this particular row, they're single rows. This one here is quite susceptible. The plants are stunted. So that would probably rate a score of at least a 2.4, more probably like a 2.6 or 2.7 in that particular rep. We go back once a week for 3 weeks. And then I get an average score, and those are the scores that you see in the guide to Crop Protect, or the seed guide. We do an average compared to previous years, so that's usually a running total, and we keep the variety in there for 3 years. So you can be pretty confident at what you see in those scores. Again, just kind of another slide on that, and this is just an example here of some of my ratings. And here, a tolerant variety, if you went out on week 1, you can see a 1.5, week 2, the same variety, 1.5, week 3, 1.5. Do that over the 3-week periods, and over the 3 reps, you get a score of 1.6. And the susceptible variety here, you can see here where my scores come in, ranging a lot over anywhere from 2. 2 is still semi-tolerant, but if I'm averaging my scores and they come out to, like a 2.2 or 2.3, then those would be considered susceptible. I don't generally give very seldom give a 2.2 as a rating score unless it's kind of the first year, but just to kind of make that distinction. Where that becomes important, where these scores are very important, is when you're doing your soil test in fall, you should do carbonates and salts test on your soil to see what levels you're at. The reason being is if your salt levels are approaching 5 and your your carbonate levels are approaching 5 and your salt levels are in that close approaching 1, you're in that extreme risk for on that particular field if you were to plant a susceptible variety. And what I tend to recommend to growers is, make your decisions on variety selection based on maturity, based on yield. Look at things like soybean cyst nematode tolerance as well, or resistance. But what's really important, if you have a field that has high salts and high carbonates, you really want to focus on picking a variety that has a really low score. So anything in that 1.6 to 1.7 for that particular field. Other varieties that are in the 2 range are still a good choice for fields that have medium carbonates and salt levels. But if you're in that high level, you want to definitely have something that's tolerant. With that, I'm going to wrap it up, but I'll leave it open for a minute for questions, and then I'll have to pop off right away here. So.
Okay, Dennis, just a couple of quick questions for you here. If you have a dense canopy and you're looking at your crop and you're maybe seeing the odd spot already on your lower leaves in peas, would it be helpful to spray earlier so you get better coverage, or should you wait till flowering?
Well, you want to make sure the disease is present. I think that's the biggest thing, and then look at the forecast. Sometimes spraying early is fine if the disease is present, but it doesn't give you an indication if there's going to be lots of, like, if it's a dry season, like, you can still have a canopy, a dense canopy, but if it's been very dry, lately here we've had some light dews, but it hasn't been too bad. Usually what I try to do is that if you use that checklist, kind of walk through and check a number of spots, like, check, at least 5 or 6 spots. I'd like to see more. See where you come up with that score. And if the disease is present and your score is in that 65 range, then that to me would trigger that first application. Again, if you have to come back a second time, you'd come back with hopefully a different fungicide group. But that's generally what I would recommend. I wouldn't go too early just to get just because you think just to get better coverage. I think if the disease is present, your score is at that 65. That's what I would trigger for that first spray application.
Okay, and how many days between applications?
I think the label says 10 to 14. So yeah, I'll just refer to the label on that one. So depending on which product depending on which product. And again, after that time, you'll have to reevaluate to see if the disease is still present and also what conditions are like, because as we were talking earlier, it's been pretty dry as of late, right? So on some years when it's a dry year, you will always get some Mycosphaerella in there, but it's not always going to affect yield. So.
Okay, and then back to your picture of the soybeans and your planting, and you don't seem to have much of a furrow. Is some of the new drills leave a furrow? So is rolling the decision for rolling more critical? Like, would you do more damage at a certain stage because of the furrow?
Not because of the furrow. Like, if the seed is in that furrow, it's actually probably going to be a bit better because the roller is going to stay a little higher. It's going to stay on the top of the furrow. And I think that would be better. And that's what I was seeing here with mine as well, with the plants, is that, because that soil is a little bit above the, or a little bit higher, when the roller goes over top of it, it doesn't damage the plants. So, like, I've, in the past, if the warmer it is, the better it is. Unfortunately, this year we've gotten there 25, 26 degree days, but we haven't had, our 30-degree days during this time period. So, but just evaluate your stand, make your first pass, look for damage. That's why it's important to do a stand count before and afterwards. And that way we'll give you an indication of whether or not, if you have lots of plants, if you have, 150, 160,000 plants, and you're only damaging 10%, and you need to roll because of stones, that's probably an acceptable loss. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks, Dennis. I know you're in a hurry here. So
yeah, I just got to step off here for this. So
thanks for the presentation, and good luck with everything you have to do.
Okay. Thank you. Okay.
Thanks,
bye.
Dennis. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go hit into the crop scouting panel. And first question is going to be for John Gavlosky. And I just wanted to double check to make sure John is on.
Yeah, I'm here, Lionel. Yes.
Perfect. Okay, John, the first question, the slide I put up is about aphids and, starting to monitor peas for aphids and when the producers should be looking at maybe spraying or what they should be looking at for when they're going to start making those type of decisions in their peas.
Yeah, so really the critical period to be scouting for aphids is during that flowering and very early podding period. Really, the the worst or the majority of the damage that can occur from pea aphids is during what they call the flat pod stage. So when the pods are still elongating, but they're still quite flat, they haven't really started to um, develop their seeds too much yet. That's the most vulnerable stage for aphids and peas. So it's the seed development that they can impact because they're competing for the phloem sap to develop those peas. So that's the critical thing to try to make sure there's not excessive damage at that time. So in order to do that, what we recommend is scouting at the beginning of flowering. You can either take 180-degree sweeps or you can check plant tips. I often will take the tips and shake them over something. If you're sweeping, the threshold is 9 to 12 aphids per sweep. So if you're doing a set of 10 sweeps, that would be 90 to 120 aphids. If you're doing the plant tip assessments, it's 2 to 3 aphids per about 8 inches of plant tip. So those are the thresholds. Now, if you're over the thresholds and you decide that an application would be potentially beneficial, when roughly half of the plants have produced some young pods, that would be the ideal timing. Often people will encounter a pea aphid situation that's above threshold later on. And one of the questions I often get is it still economical to spray? Once the seeds are fully developed, the aphids probably are causing very little economic damage at that point. Again, flat pod stage, that's the ideal timing. Maybe shortly after that, if the seeds are still really tiny in the pods, there might be some benefit. Once the seeds are more fully developed, that's when it's probably less economical to be trying to control them.
Okay, and maybe just a quick comment on some of the natural predators that are out there, so we should be watching for when we're checking.
Yeah, so in pea crop, often once the aphids start to build, there are several groups of predaceous and parasitic insects that are very good at finding them. So it's often a race. Are the natural enemies going to get there in time to stabilize those populations or even start decreasing them before things get too bad? Some of the things to look for, lady beetles, of course. Both the adult and the juvenile stage can eat a lot of aphids in a day. Hoverflies, the larvae are the predaceous stage there. They almost look like slugs, and there's a lot of different species of them. So they can be green, almost pale, almost a pinkish tinge, but kind of slug-like. Lacewings, particularly the larvae, which look like little brown alligators, really good aphid predators. If you start seeing what look like inflated, bronzy colored aphids mixed in with the greener pea aphids, those inflated bronzy ones are aphid mummies. So they've been parasitized. If you start seeing a lot of them, you've got some parasitism happening, and obviously don't count those when you're doing your assessments.
Okay, and this one is only because I know what you're doing this morning. For the people that have alfalfa out there as it's starting to flower, Are you seeing much alfalfa weevil out there?
Yeah, right now, there's quite a bit of adults, but the larval stages are starting to become present, and the feeding is starting to become noticeable in some alfalfa fields. I know there's been some spraying in the southern interlake area, and a little bit in the central region. Now's the ideal timing to be assessing alfalfa weevil. So have a look. If it's a hay crop, you do have the option of cutting the crop a little on the early side if levels are quite high. Seed crop is a bit of a trickier challenge because then um, insecticide application, unfortunately, is really the only option, and they don't always work great. And yeah, one of the things we're doing this year is we're testing to see if there's any deltamethrin resistance in alfalfa weevil. So that's one of the things. In a few minutes, I have to go and look and see how many weevils our insecticide treatment actually killed. Hopefully, it'll be near 100%.
Okay. So this year, I know I'm talking to some of the producers and they're wanting to leave their stands for a while because things have been just growing slow. Uh, they may not have the option if it's a hay crop that might be the only way to reduce the damage they'll do.
Yeah, if they're um, leaving the crop and not doing their normal sets of cuts, unfortunately, yeah, aside from early cutting, insecticides are your other option. Um, be careful with your product choices too. A couple of the products do say um, suppression or reduction on the label rather than um, control. Uh, and I know in the past I think with alfalfa weevil, I don't know that there's a lot of resistance. There might be, we will see, but they're a hard one to kill with insecticides. I think often they're hard to get good contact with. So whatever you can do to get good coverage is going to be helpful as well.
Okay, good. Well, thanks, John, for coming on. And next question I have is for Kim. And Kim, this one I don't have a slide for. It was a producer had called me last night, or actually sent me a text, and he was wanting to know about portulaca and what might be available or what he can do to control portulaca.
Yeah, that's a good question. We don't get that very often. Portulaca is just really not a field weed. So if you do see it showing up in fields, I'm betting it's right on the edge of the field and I'm betting it's coming out of a very wet ditch. So if you have portulaca, it's really a symptom that there's a lot of water in that area. Sometimes we see other weeds like, when we've got water issues in their salinity, that's when we see foxtail barley and kochia show up. We sometimes see the field horsetail or scouring rush show up in those wood areas as well. So there's obviously an issue about there being excess water in that area, or especially right on the edge of the field, because it's really portulaca is just not, or purslane it's called sometimes. Those are just not competitive weeds in a crop. So if it's creeping in, then there's probably not a lot of crop growth in that area. And it's also an area that's just, really wet. So from a herbicide perspective, something like a Treflan is a pre-emergent. That's a really good product to use, or anything in that family, Edge Treflan. Those are good products. For post-emergent, we know glyphosate really doesn't do anything at all to it, just doesn't even seem to touch it. And probably your group 4s are going to be about your best. So any of your group 4s, like even like as simple as a 2,4-D or anything with fluroxapyr or anything like that, is going to get it. But also be really careful with tillage, because when you break that plant up, it can reroot from stem fragments. And so you don't want to be going in there and doing tillage and spreading it around. But ultimately, if it does start showing up in crop, and because it's not a competitive weed, you have something else going on there that you need to fix before you can get rid of that weed. And if you fix that water problem, then that weed will not be there.
Okay. And another one, Kim, that I talked to you earlier on this week about and again, I didn't make a slide up for it, but I just remembered I had a producer call and actually sent me a picture regarding a yellow flowering weed in a lot of his ditches, and he was wondering if it was leafy spurge. And you sent me a
Yes.
comment what you thought it was. If you can make
Yeah.
a comment there too.
That was heartleaf Alexander. That's actually really common. It's in a completely different family from leafy spurge. It's more of a native plant, and we wouldn't expect to see that ever moving into a piece of cropland at all. It might move into some very poor pasture or very poor grass hay fields, but we would never see that showing up. If there's any kind of crop competition around, and it wouldn't survive tillage. And that's actually in the same family, the Umbelliferae family, which is the same family as like water hemlock and wild parsnip and all of those type of weeds that you quite commonly see in ditches. So it does tend to be in the wetter ditches as well. That family seems to like those wetter areas. So it's just, that's not a weed to be concerned of. And if you look, the flowers on that weed, if you look that up, they're very kind of flat top. To me, they look like an upside down umbrella. They kind of come from one point and all. There's actually like little curved stems, and they all kind of have like a very flat top on them, and it looks like an upside down umbrella, hence the family name. And so, so it's not something to be concerned of. But any pictures you guys have, send them to any of our regional people. They can pass them on to me. And just to know, it's good to know what it is, especially if it's not a concern, then it's not something you need to worry about.
Okay, you mentioned water parsnips. Those can be, I guess, not great for feeding, right?
Yeah. Water hemlock is one of the most poisonous weeds there is. Those are weeds that have white flowers, and they have that very typical, that umbrella type shape to the flowers. Those tend to be a lot larger. Heartleaf Alexander will be quite a short little growing weed, like it won't be very tall. But water parsnip is very similar to water hemlock is very similar to water parsnip. Those both have white flowers, whereas wild parsnip has yellow flowers. So the ones that are most plants in that family can actually have some type of compounds in them that cause some individuals or some animals to become more sensitive to the sun. So it's a photosensitivity thing. And so the more they eat them, they actually can become sunburned. So for us as people, if we touch them, we can get rashes. Cow parsnip is another one. There's quite a lot of weeds in that family, and most of them aren't agricultural weeds. We're just going to see them in wetter areas. But again, we may see them encroaching into some pastures and some hayland and stuff, especially in the wet areas. And so normally we wouldn't be probably bothering with these weeds because they'd be too wet. But if you do come into contact with them, you need to be careful, because some individuals and then some animals too can end up with some sunburning, especially around the lighter pigmented areas in the face and udders and things like that. So that is something. The weeds are generally not palatable, so they're quite bitter, I think. So animals are not going to eat them unless they don't have anything else to eat. But water hemlock is very toxic, and it's really hard to tell unless you get up close and personal whether it's water hemlock or not, because it does look very, very much like water parsnip. And so if you see something out there, you should probably just assume it's water hemlock, because lots of times I've seen mixed populations of them anyways. And even if there's just a few water hemlock, you have to be really careful because they are extremely toxic. Like one bite of this plant, especially lower down in the plant towards the base region, like the bulb is the most poisonous, but all plant parts are poisonous. But further down towards the ground is where most of the toxin accumulates. And one bite can kill a cow. So obviously extremely poisonous to us because we're a lot smaller than cows. And then there's also that photosensitivity factor as well. So these are weeds that you just should try to stay away from as much as possible. Don't have any contact with them. And for sure, try not to get those into hay, or if you're letting cattle into graze some areas that have dried up a bit, just be really careful that they have enough other plants there to eat, that they're not going to be forced to eat some of these plants that they shouldn't be.
Yeah, it's a good point, because a lot of those plants are growing in ditches, and in a dry year, we may see a lot more ditches being cut and baled. So just a caution for people to know what they're putting into a bale.
Right. And field tansy too. I get calls on that every year too. There's a lot of field tansy in ditches. And especially as we go further north, that's a weed that really starts showing up. That is a weed that is not necessarily toxic as it's fed, but it can cause compounds in female, or it has compounds in it that in pregnant female animals can cause uterine contractions and can cause abortions. So you don't want to be feeding that, especially to pregnant animals. So be careful too. If you are taking ditch hay, lots of times that's great hay. It's a good resource, but really know what other plants are in there besides the grasses and the legumes that you want. Right now, we see lots of birdfoot trefoil, flowering in the ditches. There's lots of good species out there, but be aware of the species that you don't want in your hay. And if you have any questions at all, again, send us pictures, text them to us, email them to us. We can identify them pretty quickly, either through the local staff such as Lionel or the others, or directly to myself.
Okay, great, Kim. And maybe in one of the upcoming crop talks, we could have you on briefly and get a few pictures of some of the weeds that we should watch for. It might be good just to have a visual of them too.
Sure. Yeah. Just when we start getting into taking some of those ditch hays or some of those, later. Yeah. When we start doing that, that's always a good idea. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I've got a few people on still. I got a question regarding someone who's taking a drive and they see a lot of brown fields out there and they're wondering what's going on. And I have an opinion on that one because I do a lot of driving around and I see a lot of fields like that. And I'm thinking it's either a late seeded canola field that still hasn't emerged and all you see is stubble, or maybe a spray that like a Liberty that's starting to work, or a Roundup that's starting to work to make fields look brown. But Kim, any comments on that? Or
Yeah, it is surprising how, some of those late canola fields really do look quite bare when you're driving around. It looks like there's not much seeded yet. They're just kind of starting to row up now. You can really see that now. So there is some of that. I think, there's always going to be lots of issues. Like I've had some pictures into me wondering if it's herbicide damage on some fields, whereas I think it's maybe more some nutrient deficiencies, particularly some potassium deficiency, can really show up as browning on leaf margins and leaf tip burning, and that can be confused sometimes, and you can kind of see a brown hue across the field when you have a little bit of that going on. And so there's lots of other things to be diagnosing right now, but I mean, I guess the thing is we have to get out, we have to take a look. We have our trowels or our little shovels and we start digging and we have to kind of look at the whole situation. But we do have some late seeded crops. So I think that some of that is these crops are just a little slower to emerge. With those late seeded crops, we have to be really careful to not let the weeds get ahead of us. Hopefully with the late seeding, there was time for burn off with a residual if you could, or at least, a good burn off product ahead of seeding, or some tillage at least. And then that way, with these crops, once they do get going, they should go pretty fast. And so hopefully they'll get up ahead of the weeds, but really be careful with your weed control on those crops that are still pretty small. If those weeds get out of stage and get ahead of that crop, you're kind of behind the whole year. So just make sure you're on top of the weed control. You're always better to go early rather than late on weed control.
And I'm going to throw a caution out there as well that for some of these late seeded crops, when you're going in with a product that's going to kill everything but the crop, basically, watch for drift. I was at my first drift one about I guess it was 2 days ago. I've got some pictures I'll send you, Kim, but basically it was just a little bit of a wind that came across the field. He was spraying soybeans for the first time, and it went across the field and he smoked some wheat. So it was, again, just got to be careful when you're making those decisions to spray and watch the weather.
Yeah, we've had some really windy conditions. It has been challenging. I think weed control so far has been pretty good. We've had good success with weed control, but it has been pretty challenging on some of those days. And to be really cautious, yeah, exactly as Lionel said, with all the crops around you, especially with the soybeans now, with the new enlist varieties out there. Could be side by side, will be side by side with the Extend varieties and Extend Flex varieties and the conventional as well. So be really careful around the soybeans. It's like back in the days when we had different kinds of canola systems, and we need to be careful of what's next door for drift. Most of our canola is now Liberty tolerant, but it's this, we still do have other kinds of canola, and especially with soybeans, that's something to be super careful with because of all the different systems out there now.
Good. Thanks, Kim. John, you're still on. I put up that picture of fall rye that I sent you with the white heads in it. And maybe if you just want to kind of tell the audience what you told me.
Yeah, so that could be wheat stem agate. So wheat stem agate, even though there's wheat in the name, it will affect rye, barley, and several other grasses. Now, whiteheads alone do not necessarily mean wheat stem agate. There's other potential causes. One easy way, though, to tell if it's likely wheat stem agate, grab one of the white heads and just give it a light tug. And if it really easily slides out, then obviously the stem has been severed. What wheat stem agate will do, uh, right under the sheath, they're severing the stems. So when you try to pull it out, you'll be able to really easily pull out that stem, and you'll be able to see the tip where they've severed it. So that's a good test to see if it's likely wheat stem agate or not. Again, just a light tug on the head. If it slides, don't give it a good yank. Just like I said, a light tug. If it slides out really easy, it's been cut in there, and it's likely wheat stem agate. You might be able to find the small little maggot still in the stem. Normally, it's not a huge concern. The heads are very visible when they're damaged by wheat stem maggots. So um, they really stand out. So if even 1 in 100 heads in the field was to be damaged, it would look horrible when you're walking through the field. Probably not economical, but doesn't look good. And the reality is there's no insecticides registered. There's really nothing you can do about it anyway. So don't let it panic you too much. It is normal to see a little bit of it in a wheat crop. Again, things like rye, barley, you will see it as well. Millet, timothy, a few other plants, you can see evidence of it to some degree anyway. Crop rotation and control of grassy weeds, volunteer small grains might be able to help prevent the buildup of populations in areas where it's becoming a bit more abundant. But aside from that, as mentioned, aside from some natural controls, there's really not much a person can do about it.
Okay, thanks, John. And I guess one of the things I very seldom have ever seen it in rye, and I just was wanting to. That's the one that kind of threw me a bit because I guess maybe it's because you don't see a lot of rye fields and you see a lot more wheat fields. So
yeah, and you're right. It's a lot more commonly seen in wheat.
Good, thanks, John.
Yep.
Okay. That's all the questions I have for now. Or wait, I put this one slide up here. And this is our soil moisture conditions right now. And when you been talking to a lot of producers and everybody, the biggest thing is it's dry, it's dry, it's dry. And then I went to this the soil moisture map from 0 to 30 centimeters, and it's showing that we definitely, I'm not saying it's not dry in a lot of areas, but we're still in not bad shape. So if we were to get a rain, we things are still not as bad as we may think they are. And I guess I was just wondering if Allison was on. I thought I seen her on before, and was wondering if maybe she has a comment on what she's been seeing. Or
Well, hi, Lionel. I am on, and we have had some questions about the soil moisture because, again, lots of people are seeing it as very dry. But again, our instruments are showing it's definitely dry in some areas and definitely very dry in a few areas. But just I like to provide the caveats when looking at these maps that these are based on the maximum soil moisture on that date. So on June 15th, this is what the moisture conditions were. And they're based on the instruments at our weather station. So usually that's covered by grass. And things like soil moisture can vary drastically over very short areas, even within a given field. So this is to provide a regional perspective using interpolation to provide kind of an overview of the soil moisture. And we always suggest that people use their local field scouting and you see what you're seeing on your farm in your fields as a complement to this information. So, if it shows optimal or wet in one region, that doesn't mean that your particular field might be optimal or wet. There's so many different uh, components that go into adequate soil moisture. And another thing to keep in mind is we use a qualitative scale. So we have dry, optimal, wet. Depending on your crops, that might change. And we use a scale behind the scenes that you don't see. So the difference between optimal and wet might be 0.1%. That's not necessarily captured in the picture. So that's part of what you're not seeing. So things are definitely drying out that we've seen in the last few weeks. I know we've been seeing some rain in certain parts of the area over the last few days, and there is rain in the forecast for a lot of areas coming up in the next few days. So we'll continue to monitor this for sure. And again, we do have live conditions on our live current weather viewer maps as well. So you can view all the different depths of soil moisture in your area, rather than if you don't like to wait the week for our weather reports. But yeah, hope that helps a little
Great.
bit.
Yeah, great, Alison. Sorry for putting you on the spot there, but I seen your name on the thing and I put this slide up the other day when I was putting this stuff together. So thanks for the input. It's good information.
No problem.
Okay, a little bit about the crop report. As if we go back to this slide here, we can see that we're saying that we're 100% complete, and I would say that that's fairly accurate. I don't know of any producers that are still seeding right now. I think everything is done. I think we're actually getting to the point where we're over 50, almost 60% done spraying, except for some of the later seeded crops. But most of the cereal crops have had an application of herbicide on them right now. The earliest seeded crops are starting to get in the stem elongation stage right now. So we're seeing a lot of wheat in that stage. A lot of barley and oats is tillering out already. So those crops are moving along fairly well. This is the fusarium map. So we talked about that last week. So I went and I grabbed the map for yesterday, and this is the map for yesterday. And the reason I was interested in it yesterday was it was really foggy yesterday morning, pretty much right through till about 7 o'clock in the morning. It was solid fog and over a large area. And I was wondering if that was going to change the map a lot, and it changed it a little bit from last week, but it's still in that low to moderate stage for fusarium. So I think for those producers that are looking or watching their winter wheat, the winter wheat is going to be it's not far off that stage where we'll be looking at spraying. So definitely keep an eye on these maps to see what the forecast is, and again, keep an eye on your field as to whether you might require an application. Canola, this is the crop that probably some people are seeing the brown fields on and wondering what's going on. And we see a wide range of growth stages. Because we had the long seeding window, and we have late seeded canola that's emerged and in the kind of the two leaf stage to canola that is cabbaged over and covered the ground, and in the central region, some reports of canola starting to bolt already. So, we got, from early flowering to early germination. So we're going to have a crop that's going to be widespread throughout the growing season this year. And I think that's something that's going to create some interest because of making decisions for producers regarding spraying and fungicides and everything. So that'll be interesting. Flax ranges in stage 2 because it was planted over a large time period. Producers that grow a lot of flax try to get it in early, so theirs will be the more farther advanced, and producers that don't normally grow a lot of canola just by some reason tend to leave it to the end to plant. So that'll be the ones that are just kind of nicely making it up and maybe 3 to 3 inches tall right now. Soybeans, Dennis mentioned or talked about soybeans, and they're anywhere from emerging to the third trifoliate. So they're definitely in most cases either being sprayed or are going to be sprayed soon. Dennis mentioned the iron deficiency chlorosis showing up, and again, a problem that's going to be that the soybeans will outgrow. And the peas, we talked about the peas, staging of the peas. So we're definitely anywhere from that 6 node to maybe some early fields starting to look like a flower might be coming out soon. So again, that'll be something that producers will be watching for and watching for disease and getting ready to spray if required. Few things to remind people of. July 3rd, 8th, 9th, and 10th is the Crop Diagnostic School in Carmen. And if you're wanting to attend, there is the email registration, and they'll need your name, email address, day you want to attend. And once you send in your email, they'll see if there's still room for that date. And if there's room for that date, you'll be let known and be invoiced. Also, there's a Farmer Day on July the 4th. And so if you pay or you're members of the MCA or MP, Manitoba Pulse Growers or Manitoba Canola Growers, you will able to attend for free. So if you want to go those days, you can attend for free. If you're a non-member and want to go that day, it costs you $75. Also, I mentioned this when we started some of the crop talks, but these are starting to get closer now. We're going to have some tours coming up with our diversification centers. The first one that's not too far away is the WADA one in Melita on July 17th. And I received their poster yesterday. So on July 17th, they would prefer, there's going to be a get on the bus and tour the plots. So they would prefer, if you're wanting to come, that if you would let Scott know, there's his email number or his phone, email address or his phone. And as they're taking a bus around, they would like to know how many people are coming, so they make sure they have enough spots available. So there's the poster and agenda. So mark July 17th on your calendar for the Wado Field Day. If you're interested in the other diversification center tours, that's the locations and the contact people at each of the sites. So if you want to get information on their tours earlier, please give them a call. I do plan on having most of the centers on CropTalk to talk a little bit about what's going to be happening at their tours and what they're doing at their sites this year. So you'll also get some information during CropTalk on some of these the tours coming up as well. If you have questions, you got weeds growing that you want to know what they are, like Kim mentioned, just get a hold of us, send us a picture. We'll try to get the information to you so you know what you're dealing with, and just give you a hand on figuring things out. So here's our contact information and our specialists throughout the province. Manitoba Agriculture Pasture Tour coming up on Monday, June 23rd. So that's this coming Monday. So if you're interested, it's going to happen at St. Rose. There's registration required, and it's full day starting at 8 o'clock. So if you want to attend, that's the information and the location where you'll be meeting. Also, if you have questions, there's the livestock and forage people. So if you have any questions regarding the tour or want to know more information about the tour, please feel free to contact any one of those people, and they'll definitely give you all the information you require. MASC service centers. There's the locations and the numbers. Just a heads up, seeded acreage reports are probably going to be due fairly soon. So if you haven't already submitted it, make sure that you're on top of that. And if you got any questions or comments from myself, you can contact me. There's my number, my email address, Lori's email address. And I thought it was quite the coincidence that our next Crop Talk is on June 25. And I think I'm just going to ask Aaron if there's any questions that have come in.
No questions. We are good.
We're good? Good. Okay. Thanks. Okay, perfect. Well, I'd like to thank everybody for attending today. Thanks to the presenters. Everybody's busy in the field, so have a good week and see you on the 25th.